question. If I ask you, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say, what is dementia? What comes to your mind?
Memory loss.
Yes, memory loss, because that's what we've been taught. And I am going to switch that because it's not all about memory loss. Often, and I'm going to show you this, they remember, they just can't process what they're remembering. Okay? So, it's not just about memory loss. It's much deeper than that. And we can't make them remember because they have to process it in order to remember it, and they have a broken processor. We're going to get more into this, okay? It's not always caused by Alzheimer's disease. There's over 100 different causes of dementia symptoms. Over 100. Now, the leading cause is Alzheimer's. So a higher majority of those do have Alzheimer's disease causing this kind of loss that we're going to talk about. And another myth is aging does not cause dementia symptoms. Aging is a risk factor. We are more vulnerable to these different causes as we age. So dementia. This is your 30-second elevator speech. From now on, if anybody asks you this question, what is dementia? You are going to say dementia is a list of symptoms that tells us that person has something causing them to lose brain function, and their body is telling us that with these dementia symptoms. And I'm telling you right now, it's not just about memory loss, is it? All the different parts of the brain are affected. So there's Alzheimer's disease, there's vascular dementia caused by a stroke or brain injury. There's mixed dementias, and I work with many people that have a mixed diagnosis. They might have Parkinson's and a stroke, or they might have Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. There's Creutzfeldt-Jacobs disease, there's depression, there's multiple sclerosis. Parkinson's disease. I often hear families tell me, I didn't know dementia symptoms came from Parkinson's disease. But we're going to talk about, absolutely, there's some classic dementia symptoms caused by Parkinson's disease. There's frontotemporal dementia with extreme personality changes and language problems because the frontal lobe is being affected. And there's dementia with Lewy bodies, which is kind of a mix between the damage that happens with Alzheimer's and the damage that happens with Parkinson's. And so many of Lewy body symptoms mimic both Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But all it boils down to, all of these things are going in and causing damage to different parts of the brain in a different order. And so we see different dementia symptoms progressing in a different order in each individual, which means if you've met one person with dementia symptoms, you've only met one person with dementia symptoms. So becoming dementia aware, you have to understand that your care approach must be customized to meet the needs of each individual. You can't do cookie cutter care, which is our challenge as professionals, because if you have 15 residents that have different causes and different dementia symptoms and different behaviors and different challenges, you can't do the same care approach with any of them. You have to customize it to each one. And as they continue to lose, they continue to change in their challenges. So we must remain fluid and flexible and go with them. Well, that's the same challenge if you are a caregiver to a loved one. Just because it worked well yesterday doesn't mean it'll work well today. Just because it worked well this morning doesn't mean it'll work well tonight. So we must do all of the changing. We must do all of the perception changing, all of the communication, all of the approach. The caregiver, it falls on them because that person who has this brain brain function loss cannot change themselves. So what do I mean by brain function? Because all of the causes, except perhaps maybe brain injury or trauma, all of them begin to rob you of learned brain function first. So, when an infant comes to this world, they come to this world with basic brain function. Now, an infant also comes to this world with the basic brain function of movement. So they begin to learn how to get up on their hands and knees, how to coordinate crawling, how to stand, how to take steps. How do you think that makes them feel? What are the feelings that that toddler has with their first steps? Accomplishment, independence, pride. And all of that is stored, that precious information is stored in your brain cells. And you have to go access it in order to enhance your movement. So what's going to happen if you get a cause of dementia symptoms, such as Parkinson's, that often attacks your ambulation, your balance, your coordination? What's going to happen when Parkinson's robs that information from you, which it does, and you try and get up out of the chair? What's going to happen? You fall. Falling is a huge early sign, early dementia symptom. I hear this from families often. When they become dementia aware, they come to me and they say, oh my gosh, Mrs. Dementia Whisperer, you know, this is such a good example. Our dad was always an athlete. Played softball, hiked. And then about 10 years ago, we all started to comment that as he was aging, he got clumsy. And it got worse. And his gait changed. And he began to have more and more unexplained falls. Had we known 10 years ago that that was a dementia symptom, because 10 years later, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Had we known that Alzheimer's attacked his balance and coordination, not his memory, because we were waiting for him to forget, we didn't know he had dementia symptoms, we would have accessed resources and support earlier. So that is why it is so important that we understand and have early ability to recognize what is going on. And what if I gave the whole presentation like this? Blah, 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 blah. Now y'all can hear that, right? How would that make you feel after a few minutes? I think you might be a little annoyed. Who's this crazy lady and why am I wasting my time? What if you decided, I'm not sticking around, this is a waste of my time. Who is this what? You know, I smile and I have lots of pretty pictures, but blah, 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 what? So you start to leave. What if I stood at the door and didn't let you leave? Blah, blah, blah. Blah, 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 blah. What if I did this? Blah, blah, blah. You want to answer my question? Blah, blah, blah. Does it mean anything to you? Can you respond to that? That is what their world feels like. It begins to be all this white noise that they cannot process. And then it gets even more cruel, because the very portion of their brain that might understand that there's something wrong, they don't even get to feel that. They just feel the confusion and the anxiety, because even if we try and explain to them, it's because you have this loss in your brain. What do you think they hear? Blah, blah, blah. Because you have to be able to process that for it to make sense. Now, told you I was going to tell you the good, the bad, and the ugly. This is the good. This is our hope. This is what we can use. Because when you have dementia symptoms, no matter what kind of loss of processing you have, your feelings and emotions remain. Now, infants come to us with basic emotions, but they have to learn how to understand them, regulate them, manage them. The feelings and emotions that an adult has remain. So we can communicate on a feeling level, and it helps them to trust us when we're trying to guide them. If we recognize it's not about the situation, it's about how the situation is making them feel. Okay, so a dementia-aware individual, this is a big one, and it's so difficult to use. A dementia-aware individual uses fewer questions and gives fewer options, and instead takes positive action and makes simple statements. Because we have to think for them, they have a broken thinker. And it is kinder to think for them, because every time you make them think, you make them feel anxious. Now, I go on to memory care floors all the time, and please understand, these caregivers, they have such a heart, and they're doing such a great job. But if we have not taught them to be dementia aware, if we haven't taught them to think this way, they make it harder on themselves and the residents just by doing what they've always done, what we've trained them to do all their lives, and that's ask questions. We've trained caregivers to ask questions because it's polite, and because it works with somebody with a healthy brain. But consider what that person who cannot process, when you ask a question, you are asking the person you're asking the question of to respond, and in order to respond, they have to think about the question and respond in kind. So they have to think to answer. So instead, when I go on a memory care floor and we make this small change, it's like magic. So how do you think someone's going to respond if that activity director, for example, comes up and says, would you like to listen to the music? How do you think most often we see somebody with dementia symptoms respond? What do? No. No. Are you hungry? No, I just ate. Why? It's all about how we make them feel. They hear blah, 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 blah. How are you going to respond? Blah, 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 blah? So, it is this easy, but it takes practice. We've been taught that we have to ask questions, and it's a great way to communicate, but we don't have to. I've got a surprise for you. I want you to practice this all week. I want you to take 7 days and not one time when you greet somebody, say, how are you? Don't ask them that question. I want you to have a positive action statement. Thank you for sitting up front. It's so good to see you. I love that color on you. Wow, I would have missed you had you not been here. I want you to do that all week, and I want you then to think about the reaction that you got from healthy brains too. Interesting. It is so interesting. Now, I drive my husband crazy because I'm always thinking this way. And I always want to see how people are going to react. But he had to learn the hard way because his mom, several years ago, had a very debilitating stroke. So we would practice, and he would call her up, and he'd put her on speakerphone, and I'd be there. I was his wing woman. I'm there to help him, and I'm reminding him, no questions, no questions, no questions. So we hear the nurse bring the phone, and the nurse is great because we have to help mom think, right? She has these huge gaps in processing, and the nurse said, it's your son Steve. Now, he just could do no wrong in her eyes. She adored him. So when she'd say, "Hi, Steve," she'd be so excited we could hear it in her voice, "Hi, Steve." And Steve would start out, "Hi, Mom," and then he'd trip up every time. "How'd you sleep last night?" Immediately she would switch. "Oh, Stephen, it's so loud here I can't sleep. You have to come get me." And his eyes are getting real big. I'm going, "No questions." So he says, "Mom, Laura wants to talk to you." Now I have to say she was not near as excited about that. I was not Stephen. However, I would say, "Hi, Mom. It's Laura." "Hi, Laura." "Mom, it sounds like you got a great night's sleep." "I did." Boom, she switched back. How did that make her feel in that moment? "Oh, I got a good night's sleep. Good, great." And then, as long as we guided her and gave her those feelings, we could converse with her. But it takes practice. All the time now, I'm always thinking, how can I turn that into a positive action statement? Everything I do, all the time, that's going around in my brain all the time. And I'm saying to my husband, change that into a positive action statement. Well, it's always a challenge, but I'm telling you, the difference is amazing. So why can't we go to the trouble to make them have more meaningful moments? Now, it's not going to stop it, fix it, or change it. Please understand that. But we become more kinder, more supportive in their eyes. We can approach them in a different way, and they can help us. So, we have to know we can't stop it, fix it, or change it. We give them the dignity of experiencing what the situation is making them feel. We remain fluid and flexible. We adjust to their feelings and behaviors as needed. And that way we can more successfully manage and have better care outcomes. And it is amazing. When I have worked with families and then they've come to professional care, they've recognized that they need to ask for that help. They come to dementia-aware care as dementia-aware individuals. It is like gold, because then you, as that dementia-aware caregiver, come to the professional with realistic expectations, because you know that the professional is not going to stop it, fix it, or change it. They're just going to be your care partner to help manage it. So it's so important that we spread this word, that we help everyone. I've helped entire communities become dementia aware, train their first responders, their chamber of commerce, their entrepreneurs, their business people, their family caregivers, everyone. And the difference is amazing.
So thank you so much. Did everybody learn?
Awesome.